Alright, what's up, people? We're back. Um, okay, so we're gonna do... we'll pick up where we left off. Time is 4:42. Timer started. Alright. Let's get this set up. There it is. My audio is jacked up. Let me see how this sounds. Yeah, it sounds good. Much better than it was. It was like way loud. It was way loud. There we go. Alright, so back where we were, line 21 in save logic, so let's go ahead and jump over there and see what we got going on. So we're working on getting this function right. We're gonna have this object ID arg be added, so let's go ahead and add that. I think that's a good way to do this. Say object ID. What's the syntax we use for this? So we use equals type, and this is going to be an integer. Purpose. Externally calculated ID associated with proper object, either 1 or 2 if for P1 game slash P1 P2 game minus P2. Yeah, there we go. So very straightforward there. So let's go ahead and why is this so loud? Like I keep having to turn it down and it's just loud, dude. I don't remember it being that loud. I wonder if that's why. I would set this down and then put this at like 30. There we go. That makes more sense. Okay, so what we'll do here is we're going to add in, let's try to stay in order here. We're going to do update devlog snippet. Okay, let's do that first. So let's open up our snippets. We'll do Control Shift P and then we'll do snippets, configure snippets. And Oh wait, we actually have to enter into our file here. So we need to go to VS Code snippets, and then we need to find the devlog one. Alright, devlog entry. And we're gonna have it structured differently now. It's gonna be title, and then that. Or do we... Okay, I see. We would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then do this 1, 2, 3, 4. Or I'm tripping. We don't want that one indented at all. So now that we saved that, let's see if this is correct. Okay. So I noticed that it was... There we go. Alright, yeah, so it works. That's how we want it from now on. Cool, that's better. So let's go back over here. Can exit out of setup. Can exit out of game. Alright, so we got that out of the way. That was super easy. Get rid of this from things to do. Now we have save logic, save system. This file refactor. Step 5, finish visual data save function. Implement code to save each data point through setters, etc. Alright, so that's where we're at. But let's first finish basic logic inside of inside a function. Handling various args. So that's what we'll do first. So, and let me also note that type, it's going to be int, but it's default to none, because sometimes we're not going to use this. If we are dealing with card objects, and you know what, I'll put this right here. Say, if we are dealing with card objects, we won't have an object ID. Therefore, it will be default to none. Yeah, so that's how we know that we're dealing with a card object, but we don't need to necessarily know that. Like, we don't... That's not really going to matter when we're saving the data, which is what this function handles. So how do we structure this? We have object, and the object is the actual data. So we'll just put object equals actual data. Object name equals string rep of object slash namespace, and then object ID only for non-card objects, the 1 or 2 for P1/P2. So object is what actually is going to be saved. So what we'll do is we'll say cursor dot execute, and then forgetting the syntax here, we'll say insert into save data. Let me see. I gotta find this from the test because let's bring this over here. Change this to orange so I can. Alright. So this is the syntax. We need to do insert into. Oh, I don't like this. Okay, insert into save data. And we have object name and then value. And we're going to say values and we don't have to do the placeholder thing. Remember, we can just do, let's see, we can just do them like directly without doing placeholders. Let me see if I can find an example. Here we go. So we can just do insert into save data, but it's okay to explicitly like name it like that. I like doing it that way because, you know, explicit's better than implicit. It's good to know, you know, to see it. So you, just in case things changed or whatever, like it will, it's a failsafe. It's a way to ensure that you're doing it properly in accordance with the fields, just in case you had changed the fields in the database you didn't remember. So we have the values, and the values are going to be, we pass in as a, like such, we would say object name would be object name, obviously. So we're going to do object name, and then comma, and then this will be, the value will be the object. Or we could, you know, maybe we should change that to be called data, because that's actually more specific. I think I will change that. We'll say this should be called data, not object. So let's change this. Object name, value, values, object name, and then the values field would be the data. But before we can do this, we have to calculate the object name from the ID. So this is going to be changed to be called data. And this is going to be called the data to be saved. String, integer, etc. Purpose object must be data must be passed from location which called this function so we could save it. Alright. And let me see, changing that name might mean I need to reform some of these nodes here. Finish basic login inside a function, node implement code to save each data point through setters, card adders. Object name arg for visual data save function would be, I don't think we necessarily need to modify anything there. Alright, so we have data equals the actual data. Let me just put this up here. This is just a little note. So we're going to do below line write data to database. But before that, we're gonna have to convert if object ID is not equal to none, convert well, okay, so I'm thinking about this, and if we're going to externally calculate the ID, which I think we are, we're not going to do it like internally. What we would do, like, doesn't that mean we don't actually need object ID at all? And we would just do like if the ID is equal to 1, then object name would be that also would be calculated beforehand, right? So I think I don't think we actually need object ID. Object ID seems extra in this regard because if we have the ID externally, we use the ID to dynamically generate the object name at the time that we call the function, which has to be done. Like we have to, properly enter the object name as either 1 or 2 because it has to be specific to player 1 or player 2, depending on which it's associated with. And in that case, there's no reason to have the object ID at all. Does that make sense? I mean, I was just wondering, why did I think I needed to have an object ID? Let me read my notes just to make sure I'm not missing anything. I don't think I am, though. Object name to arg for visual data save function would be in format of string equal to namespaces of object. Object name for the arg for data of player name would be passed in as a name. Object ID arg for visual would be externally calculated, passed in the form of 1 or 2. So yeah, that doesn't make sense. There's no reason to do that. If we're already externally calculating it, we could just modify the object name arg to reflect the object ID, which would nullify the necessity for object ID being an argument in the function at all. So object ID arg would be used to concatenate the string. So yeah, we wouldn't need to do that. Yeah, so that is extra and is unnecessary. So we're going to get rid of that. Would be in the format of string equal to namespace object name player name would be passed in as p1 / p2 dot name. So just to be specific there, it would be directly correlated to the namespace of the object, i.e. p1 dot name or p2 dot name. So object ID actually is not a thing anymore. So we can get rid of that. Cool. Less is better. Get rid of this object ID. If object ID is equal to none, don't need that at all. Write data to database. String wrap of object / namespace. Okay, yeah, so that makes it a lot more simple. That means we would just directly write the data to the database by saying cursor execute, insert into save data, object name value, values would be object name and then data. And then this object ID is actually not a thing. It doesn't exist anymore. Cool. So there's that. What else do we need to have here? It auto commits, so we don't have to add that in. Let's go back over here though and look for. Yeah, it auto commits, so we don't have to do that at all. Is that all? Is that all that it would happen? I feel like there's more that would need to be done. Just one line? Well, man, in that case, we would just import the cursor and just directly run the execution line, right? Like, why do we even need why do we even need the function if it's just one line? I mean, it's a little easier to read, but honestly, I just thought there was going to be more to be done. Let's see here. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's actually it. We just execute it by inserting it into the associated table, and it's done. There's nothing else that needs to be done. It auto commits, and therefore it's been written. So yeah, that does raise the question of, do we actually need this function, or can we just directly call cursor execute? And we can just import the cursor. Now, if we did that, that would imply that would mean we would have to change this code up a little bit. Well, no, not necessarily. Well, so this is a question of like how imports work. If we were to import, like, could we import cursor from this file? I don't think we could. We would have to first have cursor be created in the file, and then we would have to import cursor directly from the file into the places which wanted to save data. So running the function here and importing that function to a file is fine, because this function is in the context of this file. But actually, I don't even know if that would work either, because like cursor, this is an import thing where I'm not sure how that works exactly. So if we import this function to a file, and that file is run like at the beginning, when we run this function from that file, it would create cursor, which is how we end up actually saving the data to the databases and all that. But if we did that through the function call in another file that imports this function, would we then be able to reference cursor from a completely different file that hasn't run this? And I think the answer actually is yes, it would exist, because it all happens within the same interpreter. So if we have a string of imports from a file, a root file, let's just say client. If the client file imports save db setup, whenever it makes that import and then runs it, runs this function, in the context of that client file, cursor now exists. Therefore, if we then were to import game into client or whatever, and inside of game we referenced cursor, I think that would work. I think it would. Well, we can test that. We could run a test on this. So this is a little bit... This kind of changes everything a little bit, how I'm going to have to structure this. Because if we're just going to run this one-liner here, then there's no reason to use this function. We would just directly reference cursor. But since we're not going to be like importing in that perfect like order, it's not going to be a comprehensive import sequence or whatever you want to call it. That's not going to allow us to reference cursor from those individual places comprehensively. And I think the smarter, more proper thing to do would be to import cursor into all the places that it's needed. And you know, I'm just realizing as well, progression is actually a client-side a server-side operation. So this is only going to save this data on the server side, but we need that to be done client side. So this is not going to work. This is wrong. what we would have to do is place it inside of the, what do you call it? Whenever, well, we don't have a setter. So we would have to handle this in dir check receive. So whenever the player name gets changed, we end up transferring this data through the data transfer function right here. Yeah, so the data transfer function transfers this data, and then on the receiving side, on the client side, the client will receive this data. Let's bring that up, change this color to be, let's say blue. And inside of dir check, let's see if we can find it. We eventually, if we go through these if, elif, we get to else, one of them is going to handle name. Which one handles name? So this is for game. This would not be... This doesn't account for name. So where is it accounted for? I mean, it definitely is, because... Let's see, if because it gets changed and it works. It's just a matter of finding it. So if dir is equal to player, if has adder is instance object, else. This is for input text final and text input active. So does this handle name? I'm guessing this section handles name right here. This else. Because this is the equivalent of the setter. We don't actually use a property setter. We just call setAdder here in this function. And these are all for game. And this is for else. Accounts for all other adder name string instances. So this has to handle name. I would say this else, and then we're going to go to if dir is equal to game. It's not going to enter into this because dir would be player. And then apply data should be set to true because it's default to true up here. Then it would go down here if dir is equal to player, blah, blah, blah. It would assign that. It would not enter into this if. It would go to else because we set it directly since it's just a regular attribute. This line, it would not enter into that because it would be client side. So it would go to this else, and then it would go to this setAdder. So let me, so that's going to be the spot. Let's put the date here and say save system. Determined, let's say, I think this is where P1 names /P2 dot name is changed after is set after it is changed to server side during progression. Therefore, this is where we would check for this adder and save it to the DB. And this is because we don't have a setter associated with this adder. It's not a property. Alright, so then we'll put below line 319.25, save system, add in code to save p1 slash p2 dot name to db. So then we would just say cursor dot execute and insert into save data values. And how do we reference this? And we need to test first. Let's put test to ensure this is where this adder is received through. So we need to code that in, and we'll do that by saying below line, we'll just copy this part. Test code to see if p1 name is handled here. And then we'll say if adder name string is equal to, now I can't remember, how do we do this? Do we say, okay, adder name string is just the string name of the attribute, not including p1 or p2 prefixes. So in this case, it would just be name, right? So we say if adder name string is equal to name, then we would say custom logger, the custom logger dot traceback print log function, and this is going to be client pi, and then we do client ID, current client ID, it's been a while since I worked in dircheck, so let's see, go all the way to the top. Okay, we actually pass in client ID directly, and then client ID is the client that called the dirtcheck's ID. So we would just say client ID straight up. And then we say, so client by client ID, and then what else? We'll just put P1, P2 dot name is handled here. There we go. Actually, let's put this in all caps so it'll jump out at us, because we're just doing this for testing. p1/p2.name is handled here. All right. And we'll hold off on that. So first of all, I want to make sure we're in the right spot. So let's cd to Canasta main and do the same thing here. And we're just going to run server. And then we're going to run the client and see what happens. Okay, that's right. It doesn't actually work. So we have to get it up and running to be able to test that. But what we can do, since the other branch is stable and it's basically like the same thing as this one, we could add that code. We could switch branches. We could switch branches to do that, to test to see if name is handled at that section. So I think we'll do that. So we can copy this, and this is in dir check line 334. I don't think the line numbers are going to be the same, but we'll see. So let's terminate that. Now we're going to do git stash to stash our changes. And then what just happened here? Say working directory and say don't feature. Okay. Now we do git checkout main. There we go. Okay. So now if we go down here to, let's see. Alright, so it's pretty close. It's right here. Yeah, so this is the section right here. If outer name string is equal to name. And we can even say if name is in outer name string to make it a little bit, just in case I didn't remember exactly how it worked, we could say if name in outer name string. That would, I'll just put outer name string equals outer name string. And then there we go. So let's run this. We'll do py server and then py client. Okay, so it's having an issue here because line 1. There we go. Now let's do it again. Okay, so we hit L. Now it's going to be waiting. So we have to open up another client. cd Canasta main. Then py client L. Alright, and then if we do just random name. There we go. You can see this output right there. Outer name string equals name. P1, P2 name is handled here. So we did verify that. Cool. That was really easy. So this we just changed here. Let's get rid of that. Oh, and it lets me. It actually will let you revert back to the other branch's version of this file. So you have to be really careful when doing an undo. If you noticed when I undid right there, me it let me go past the point at which I switched branches in the code editor. And since I have autosave set up, it would have overwritten um, this branch's version with the other branch's version of this file. So you got to be real careful there. So as you can see, I did undo to the correct spot. The only thing that I do want to change is that, because that has to be a blank line at the top, since we have a, what is it called, a shebang line at the very top. That would cause an issue when you try to run client. So we're done here. We can switch back to the other branch. So we'll go to get checkout new feature. It's okay, it won't let us do it. We have to do get stash. So we're gonna do get stash. There we go. Now we can do get checkout new feature. Alright, so we're back over to new feature branch. You go all the way down here. Right here, and we can say if, well, we already know that it is. So we say if adder name string is equal to, and it was name, right? It was name. Let's see. The output was adder name string equals name. So that is correct. So we say if adder name string is equal to name, then we would check to see if client ID is equal to 1, then we want to do cursor.execute insert into save data and let's bring this up over here, the SQLite test. And I want to do it the proper way, so we'll do it like this. Insert into save data, and then we're going to have our two fields for the database, and those are object name, value, and then we're going to do values, keyword, and then we're going to have our two placeholders, because there's two fields that we're going to be filling out. And then we're going to say on conflict object name meaning if it already exists, do update set, and then we're going to set that if it already exists, that means we're updating it. Then we're going to do value equals insert into save data object name value values on conflict object name do update set value equals what? Value in this case would be equal to okay, I see. I'm not looking at the rest of the line. We would do value would be equal to, and this is for object name. So I think then we would do double quotes because we want it to be a string. No. This is the value associated with the object name. I'm sorry. So the value actually is going to be the actual name. So we're inserting into save data into the fields object name and value with the two placeholders on conflict of object name, meaning if there's already that object name in the database, then we're going to update that entry and we're going to set the value equal to whatever the new name value is. And that would be a lot easier. This would be a lot easier to just call that function. So now I'm seeing why I would want to use the function, and it's because I don't want to have to write this out every time, because this is kind of complicated syntax. I mean, it's good to learn it and everything, but I don't need to write this over and over again, right? So I think what I would prefer to do would be to import that function and then just run that function. So what we'll do is, let's put save (31925) save system, save the data to the database. Since this is effectively the only place where .name is actually set, this is where it must be saved. Alright. So we're going to call visual data save function, and let's go over to visual data save function. So we are going to keep this function, but what we're going to do is we're going to, why do we still have object ID? Didn't I get rid of that? Oh, because I didn't load in my get stash. So if I stash and then come back, the changes need to be applied. Is that how that works? I don't use get stash much. So say VS Code get stash and then switch branches. When I return back to original branch where I had previously stashed, the stash changes aren't applied anymore, aka I have to reapply the stash to get those changes back. Yes, that's correct. When you use get stash, it temporarily saves your changes and removes them from your working directory, allowing you to switch branches without losing those changes. Here's what typically happens in the scenario you're describing. You stash your changes. This saves the changes you made, but doesn't apply them anywhere yet. Then you switch to a different branch. Git allows you to do this since you stash your changes, and your working directory is now clean. So you stash your changes, save changes you made, but doesn't apply them. You switch to a different branch. You return to the original branch. The stash is still there, but it's not automatically applied back to your working directory. You must apply the stash manually. Git doesn't automatically apply stash changes when you switch back to the branch because the stash is just save changes, not an active part of the branch. You have to manually reapply the stash using git stash apply. So let's do that. Let's say git stash apply. Okay. Your local changes to the following files will be overwritten by merge. Oh, it's because I changed data after I returned without reapplying the stash. Changes. Please commit your changes or stash them before you merge. Aborting on branch 2 feature. Your branch is up to date with Canasta new feature. Changes not staged for commit. No changes added to. Okay, I see. So it's not going to let me do this until I undo git restore changes not staged for commit. Use git add to update what will be committed. Use git restore file to discard changes in working directory. The only one that was changed was client. So if we go over here, I just want to see how this works now, honestly, at this point. So if I do git restore and then dot, that got rid of all the changes that I had just made. So see what it did? It removed those changes. Now I can do git stash apply, and it modified client. Let's see. What changed? So apparently there's merged conflicts now. Git stash apply. Cannot merge binary files. I'm not worried about that. Conflict CPython, not worried about that. Conflict in client on branch new feature. So we have a conflict when I did the stash apply. Changes to be committed. Use git restore to unstage. Unmerged paths. Use git restore to unstage. So these are the ones that are conflicted. Okay. So if we go to resolve and merge editor, so it's loading. I don't understand what the differences would be. I guess it's going to take a while. Accept all changes from the left. Yeah, well, you can't actually see anything. It's not like loaded. Okay, there we go. So what's the difference? Okay, I changed this first line. This is main branches client by, and then I just added file info. So we want to accept this. Accept the current. We want it to say file info. So we would say that. And then this blank line, that's just the blank line, I guess. There we go. And is that it? It was just that. Okay. That was a little bit confusing, honestly. I don't know. I thought I committed those changes yesterday. So I don't understand why when I did the stash after I had already committed those changes, it reverted back to the... I guess I didn't actually. I guess I must have changed it right after I did the commit. Because Git don't lie, baby. Okay. That's a little bit confusing. It's all good. So I don't actually want to look at source control right now. Okay, that was a little bit of a sidetrack I didn't want to have to deal with, but it's done now. Now at this point, everything should be how it was, meaning we can finally add this code here, where we say if attr_name string is equal to name, if client ID is equal to 1, then we do visual data save function, and the object we're going to pass, it's not actually object, we want it to be called data, so we'll say data. Now I'm confused here because I thought I stashed these changes after I had modified this to say data instead of object. So I'm a little bit confused here. How do we list our stashes? Get stash list. So that's something old, and that's the only one. Yeah, that's it. Delete all stashes. Get stash clear. Get stash clear. Now get stash list. There we go. Alright, I don't know why those changes got lost. I need to brush up on how stash works because, in my opinion, as far as I understood it, whenever I reverted back to this branch and then reapplied the stash, after I had changed this to say data and then I had fixed this object ID stuff, it didn't go back to that state. So I'm a little bit confused concerning that. We have to get rid of this object ID again. Okay, it reverted to even prior to that because that's when that comment was made. Strange. Let's do cursor dot execute, and hopefully we'll actually be able to get this done. And then insert into save data. And then let's go over here and find this upsert line. Let's copy it because we do want to use upsert in case of overwriting. So then we're going to say object name value values, and then our two placeholders for our two fields, and then on conflict of which one, object name. If object name exists in there, then we do update. We want to set the value equal to data. So we'll say data. And then, comma, we're going to try to set it, if this is going to be the first time setting it, we would set it to object name would be object name, and then value would be the equivalent of data. So it'd be object name and then data. And let me make sure I got this syntax right here. So we have do update set value equals data, but this is supposed to be the end of the string, so we close it off like that, and then we do comma, a tuple consisting of the f string object name, since the first one is object name, and then the second field is value, we want the value to be the equivalent of what the data is. And then we don't need to close this as a string because it's already been closed. And do we need, okay, yeah, we do need that parentheses closed there because this is a tuple and it has to be a tuple. And then this is the closing of the overall execute method. So this should be correct. Let's just review it. Cursor.execute, insert into save data table, object name, value as the fields, values, two placeholders on conflict of object name. We do update and then we set the value field equal to the data argument, and we close that string off, and then we have our, in the case of it's not a conflict, we would set those two fields equal to the object name arg data and the data for the value field. And I think that is correct. I'm going to give that my double stamp of approval. We can get rid of this now, and we'll just put that below line. Save system, and we actually want to always put the date first. And we can do colon right there. We'll say saves the data to the DB, accounting for updates. This is an upsert which is required. And then we don't need to commit because auto commit is enabled. So I don't even need to put that there. Yeah, so I think that's gonna do the trick. That's what we want it to do. And let me make sure this comment's correct. Function which is run to save all data associated with visuals, but it's not actually. It's run to save data, any data associated with visuals. Card location set of params object, which this is actually not called object anymore. It's called data, and it is type. What is the type? The type of the data is data to be saved. It could vary. It could be a variety of things. We'll say depends on data type, string, int, etc. And then we have the purpose. Let's fix this a little bit. Params data type depends on, what do you say? Depends, string, int, etc. And then the purpose is really the data to be saved for data restoration during after disconnect. There you go. Alright, so that's taken care of. That's a lot cleaner. Now we have to add the object one, object name. Say object name. And this is going to be, we say equals type. The type of it is going to be either a string or an integer. String / int. If card object, then it will be int, otherwise string. we use int for card data to streamline data retrieval process when loading this data in. Alright. And let me just put that as a note here. We'll just say must be upsert. Okay, so this function should be good to go. Now, whenever we go back to, we don't need this here. So this is wrong. Add code to save player name. We get rid of this. So that means we go all the way back to the top here. And we get rid of this. We don't need to import that because this is server side. We're not working server side. We're working client side. So we go back over to save logic, client. Then here we have to make sure we're importing the stuff. So yeah, from save logic import save db setup visual data save function and then loop data save function. There we go. And then we're gonna pass in the order of the parameters is data and then object name. So should we switch it to be object name and then data to match? I think we should. Let's change it to be object name first to match the order of the database because that makes sense. So we're gonna put the data one last, like so. Bam, and then that. So let's read it now. So now we have object name and then data, and this is a function which is run to save data associated with visuals, i.e. card location, etc. Param object name first, type string or int if card object, then int otherwise string. We use int for card data to streamline retrieval process when loading this data in. Then we have data which is equal to type depends. String, int, etc. Purpose the data to be saved, or the data associated with each object name namespace to be saved for data restoration after DC. Alright. So then we have insert into save data object name value. Values on complex object name do update set value equal to data. And then we have object name data. Must be upsert. Cool. So go back over here. And we need to pass in the object name. So in this case, it would be p1.name. And then the value would be, well, I don't know. What would the value name be? So let's first, real quick, do an elif, which will say else, which is the same as saying elif client ID is equal to 2. In this case, it would be p2 name, but we need to reference. Okay, so we're setting the object attr name string to the received data. So the received data is what we would want to pass in. That is the actual name value. So we'll say receive data, receive data. There you go. So now whenever the name is sent over the network from the server, it's going to be changed on the server side. Well, it's not actually. It's going to be well, yeah, it is, because we put in our input on the client side when it asks us what our name is. When we enter that data, it sends back the final entered data to the server side. Then from the server side, it translates that into the player's name, and then that gets sent back to the client as the name under this attribute P1 or P2 name. this section of code handles the reception of that data. That is going to then cause us to check if add name string is equal to name. If it is, we're going to save the save this data. And we'll just put a note here for save system. Since this is the only place dot name is set, this is where the data must be saved for data retrieval. There we go. And then if client ID is equal to 1, then that means we're dealing with client 1, so we would do visual data save function, and the object name would be the string p1.name, and the associated value would be the received data. Else, which is the same as saying elif client ID is equal to 2, in that case we would do the same thing but with a p2 name string instead of p1 name, since we're dealing with 2 instead of 1, passing in the received data as well. And that should do it. So we're going to stop here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Let's put the date, 3/19/25, stopped here. And then let's make sure we test this. Above section needs to be tested. So we're going to test that next time. Let's go ahead and close this out. And yeah, so that was good progress. It actually took a lot longer to do. I didn't think it was going to take us so long, but it did. It is what it is. We actually have to add a title, and the title will be save system visual data save function second pass. There we go. And the rest doesn't have to be, well, I just like it to be that way. So we can copy this, but the times are different. Let's do this. This is going to change. When did we start? We can calculate the time going back an hour and 18 minutes. So this was 4:41. So 4:41 to, we'll just say 6:01. And that's an hour and 20 minutes. So we'll just say an hour and a half. Close enough, right? And then we're going to change this to be 4:41 to 5:59. See, working on second pass of save system, begin fleshing out, and this is continued. Logic by stopped at line. We actually stopped at line number 355 in client pi. True. And then we're going to commit our change. We're going to stage commit and push our changes. So we'll do 6:01. There we go. So that looks good to me. We'll copy this. And then we're going to go over to things to do. Object name arg would be in the form of int for card group. See, I had changed all that. Something with the stash I did, I don't know, it messed things up, and I don't really understand why it did what it did. I have to remember Git behavior can be a little bit counter to what you would think it's natural. Like it's just different sometimes than what you would naturally expect it to be. So let's put it right here. Object name, game adder, player adder. Which one do we do? Name. So we'll just say current. We'll say current. Um, okay, cool. There we go. All right, so let's go over here. Um, let's do cd out to the root of the project since we're done. The root project directory, git branch, we're on new feature, so we're going to do git add to add everything, git commit -m. We have our commit message with our title being save system, visual data save function, second pass. Then we have the rest of our, the date, the time, etc., etc. There we go. So we can go ahead and make that commit. We did 6 files change, 34 insertions, 25 deletions, and then we can do git push to push the new code to the remote branch. Now we're gonna push to the well, not push, rather we're going to update our local copy. So we'll go over to this project file, copy it, go into the backup, delete this old one, paste it in, the new one, enter into text devlog, go all the way to the end, and verify this is today's date and the correct entry, which is indeed the right one. So now we can go back out and rename the folder to reflect today's date, which was the last time we locally backed it up. Alright dudes, well that was it. We're done now, and I will see you all next time. Have a good day.